Welcome to Hip Replacement, the conversation between generations X, Y, and Z. I'm your host, Ben Dietz.
And I'm your host, Kyle Raymond Fitzpatrick. Every week we get together and talk with guests from Gen Z and beyond to try and understand just exactly what's going on in the current moment.
Because we're talking about these generations. Okay, guys, it's lucky number 7, Hip Replacement, episode number 7. Kyle, we're back. We're here with Erin Vail. Please explain.
Yes, so we have Erin Vail of the Fanbase Substack, which is a brilliant newsletter about fan culture, specifically, or ranging from sports culture all the way to pop culture, everything in between. But I think Erin does a really good job about talking about sports and as it relates to like wider culture. I'm not a big sports person. I'm arguably anti-sports, but I really appreciate being able to tap in via Erin. So thank you for that, Erin. And Erin is not just like some, for lack of better, it's not some random like, I like sports. Like Erin is a producer at ESPN and has been for a long time across many different media expressions at ESPN. So welcome. Oh, also, Erin, way back when I was producing TV, Erin worked at a sort of digital media company, and I hired Erin from literally,
Was it Awesomeness?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sure was.
The only tween digital media company that I can think of.
Wow.
Although I'm sure as subject matter experts, you might have been able to name one or two other ones. That and the one that makes Cocoa Melon from Montreal.
We were in the trenches of Awesomeness, I think pre or as it was sort of being acquired by Viacom. We were there for some time, but like Erin,
my lord,
I don't know if this still exists, but like Erin, I literally pulled your resume out of a stack of resumes, and the rest is sort of history. In a way, not to say that I'm not saying that I'm the kingmaker, but like that was
on like the salmon colored paper or something. You stole the trick from the FT, and
it was normal. It was probably not a good. I mean, I was a senior in college when I applied for that job, so it was probably not formatted in a cool way. I went to school in DC, so it was like all business. I hadn't worked in entertainment before, and then I moved to LA.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
That was the time. Anyway, here we are.
Oh my God! Well,
it was a fun time.
I mean, Erin. Well, in that case, welcome to the lion's den of anti-sport. Apparently, this is every episode we learn. I learned something new about Kyle, but I didn't realize he was anti-sport.
I mean,
anyway. Well, so okay, the theme of the podcast, generally speaking, is the discourse, as the kids would say, between generations X, Y, and Z. And the thing we normally do is we start, because I'm old and need things explained to me. We start with a Gen X conundrum, but this time we're going to do something a little different, because there's an interesting corollary between a couple of stories that you suggested around Gen Z people all dressing the same, and a later sort of Gen X style story. And then we'll loop back to Gen Y, because of course we've got to get to Kyle and the trials and tribulations of the millennials. So Erin, so you sent two stories. One was from the New York Post and one was from Vogue Business, and they were both about essentially how young people are all dressing the same. Talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, so this is something that I first stumbled upon this topic, scrolling on TikTok, as one does in 2025, that basically because of TikTok and because of social media, because of influencer culture, a lot of the places where people are finding like fashion inspiration are kind of all the same. And these aesthetics that kind of take over the like clean girl aesthetic, or just kind of mob wife aesthetic, postal grandmother or whatever, they kind of tend to take over, and there's no like individuality when it comes to style anymore. And I don't know if it was linked in either one of the pieces, but there was like this photo that went viral on Twitter of like a group of Gen Z girls standing outside of the bar, and every one of them is wearing like a pair of jeans and like the same black top, the same sneakers. And it's something that I have also kind of tried to pay attention to or keep an eye on. I live in New York now, and so if I'm going out in Brooklyn or Manhattan, or just kind of like looking at different people's street style, it does seem like there's a lot less people just kind of dressing like an individual, like a person, and a lot of like, oh, everyone looks the same. It's the same kind of vibe. It's the same look. And I just think that is interesting on a number of levels. I feel like
what do you put it down to? I mean, is it a I have several theories, but I'm interested to know kind of what you ascribe that to.
Yeah, I mean, I think social media is wonderful in the ways that it connects us, but I think it also makes us all want to be the same. It makes us all want to be connected. And you see people dressing a certain way and you think, oh, the way to be like them, I want to copy them.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of it probably has to do with consumer culture and commodification, especially on TikTok. It's so easy to just go like TikTok shop. I want that top.
Oh, that's interesting.
Kind of, I think maybe Kyle had written about this, like the Shein kind of epidemic of everything is cheap and easy to get within 2 days, and it's just right at your fingertips. So I think there's a couple reasons for it. But
yeah, it seems to me. So I have teenagers, and the first time that I you notice this for years without necessarily noticing it, but the time that it really became clear to me was Jingle Ball 2024, Jingle Ball 2023, sorry, which was the Olivia Rodrigo year, which is why I agreed to take my daughter and her friends Vicky and Jolie to Jingle Ball, because I was like, I like Olivia Rodrigo. In any case, but yeah, every girl of a particular age was dressed in a uniform, and at that time it was Nike Dunks or Air Jordan 1s, light blue denim, or light denim, light wash denim, and a dark top, like a black top. So very much similar to the stories that you're talking about. And what so I just thought that was remarkable. What I also thought was remarkable was that all of their moms were dressed the same too. So that and I don't mean necessarily in the same outfits, but whatever their moms all had the same thing on the aloe set or whatever it was, right? And the Lexus key dangling from their keychain coming in from Long Island type beat. In any case, what it just made me think of was just like this is a move for security. Like in an uncertain world, this is about how do I minimize risk of being different, risk of being socially out there, risk of wardrobe failure, wardrobe malfunction, whatever you want to call it. So I understand the flight to safety. The thing that I don't understand is that writ large, like, we are more successful when we're different. And that is, so it seems counterintuitive. And I wonder whether it's just a generational thing or whether it's moment, the zeitgeist in general.
Yeah. But I think that I think it sort of transcends generations, but I do think sort of Gen Z, Gen Alpha sort of are really right in the center of the, universe of whatever you want to call it. And I think specifically it's because of sort of like what you were getting at, Ben, is that like it's about this sort of fitting in thing, but it's sort of, algorithms, and you're sort of presenting yourself online is about that, yes, but it's also sort of magnified by being at an age where like everything's about fitting in. So you're sort of really minimizing that sort of like danger of sort of stepping out and looking different and being different. And even if you are different, sure, but like it's sort of a safety mechanism, a sort of like, funny enough, a weird sort of like fear of missing out. It's not exactly FOMO, but it's just like, it's like a fear of cousin. Yeah, it's sort of like they relate of like, I need to signal that I am of a type to sort of like be appreciated, and that's sort of like
fear
the core
of
whatever.
Standing out.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
FOSO.
Yeah. Which
you heard it here first, folks. Hip replacement coinage.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting too, because I know like fashion is cyclical and we see kind of trends cycle through. And, when I was a kid or when I was in middle school or high school, it was like the early 2000s to 2010. And it was just I feel like early aughts fashion is now kind of back in style, but it's almost like become stunted here, where we had like a 90s revival, we had an 80s revival, and now it feels like we're just kind of stuck at this one moment. And I think the other part of it too is not only is Gen Z dressing and everyone's kind of dressing the same, I think millennials and Gen X and older people are also trying to dress younger. So then it just kind of creates this like homogeneity across the board of that we're all trying to look the same. We're all trying to be safe and be, so I don't know, just interesting to think about like my own, like when I was in middle school, I was obsessed with the movie Grease, and I wanted to dress like the 50s. And then I also love the 80s. I wanted to dress like my mom in the 80s. And then I was 13. I was like, I want boys to like me, so I guess I'm going to have to dress like all the other girls in school and wear like Abercrombie mini skirts and Hollister tops.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just what's happened to society, is that everyone's we all gotta look the same.
Like I think it 100%. I think it's sort of like the wanting to look the same is at the expense of sort of like losing the sort of creativity you're talking about. Whether you want to dress like, Sandy from Greece, sure, but like that is even a sort of expression of personality, creativity, reference, etc. That sort of like gets scrubbed away because of the algorithm, because of sort of societal pressures, and not to say sort of like conservatism, but like it does make conservatism a sort of gesture because you are so sort of scared, and like that's a thing. But I think the creativity thing is a big thing. I think we see this more and more, or it's becoming more and more of a conversation online, because like a good example, I don't remember the creator who did literally like a minute video on this, but like now there is this sort of format going around on TikTok about like people sort of pretending they're like Lizzie McGuire, like Lizzie McGuiring their life, and or like using like a voiceover technique to sort of like present their life. And like what this creator was getting at was that like, these are cute, but like these are formats that sort of like are collapsing the content. So like it doesn't matter what they're saying. People aren't responding to like you having an interesting day. They're responding to like, oh, you animated part of it, so how cute, Lizzie McGuire. So like it really isn't about the creativity at that point. It's just like you are just copying and pasting an idea. And you're not iterating, you're not actually making anything new, but you feel like it because it is a creative gesture.
You've performed. Good. You did a good job on that set. Now in another 30 reps type.
Yeah, 100%.
Situation.
And it's
right?
like it's a false.
It's cultural training. Interesting. Okay, so there is that, and then of course the other underlying factor here is the idea of starter kits or starter packs.
Yeah.
I guess you said both ways. Like the idea that you buy your way into a particular identity or a particular set of codes or belongings by simply like ordering the right stuff. Like I got the same jeans as A$AP Rocky and the same sunglasses as Rihanna, and now I don't know what I am. I'm out about $800, but the
Rihanna's husband.
But so I guess there's that. Now this was the turn that I wanted to take in the episode though. The counter to that are my Gen X compatriots, because according to Vogue Business this morning, Gen X is out there. Like we're fully leaning into the Patricia Fieldsation of our 20s and 30s and Sex and the City and so on and so forth, and we are going ham. There are all of these really interesting testimonials from people in their 50s and as old as 60 saying, yeah, I'm out there looking for that weird thing, or I'm spending buy a different handbag in every place that I go. And the Vogue article is the Vogue Business article I think is a little reductive, because it's sort of like luxury brands should be paying attention to these consumers who spend shitloads of money. Yeah, that real you think, but I did think it was interesting some of the choices these people were making. Like there's one who was talking about waiting on 4 different sites to get a pair of Suey Coke 5-finger furry shoes. They make your feet look like Yetis, which is not the cooler.
God,
it is a very, very strange choice. But I also just think this is we've kind of gotten people my age and older have gotten to the point where we're just like, we're going to lean into our unk status and just go crazy with it, because why not?
Well, I feel like that's like it's sort of is a trickle up from, I think, let's say what millennials are doing in the 20s, like, and now like I think the sort of like the drop culture, the sort of like getting like that sort of like thing is now sort of pervaded everything. But like now you have a group who actually has the money to do it. Like millennials couldn't sustain it, nor Gen Z wasn't able to sort of get into it. So now the people who sort of are the motor of that and able to do it are the people who like maybe great career, great money. They might not have kids at home anymore. They may not have ever had kids, and now they can just really sort of spend. And especially like, I mean, that article was very much like, yeah, tell me the luxury market isn't suffering without telling me the luxury market is suffering. It's this is very clear what this is trying to get at. But like, I think it's funny because I definitely know a good amount of people who are, say, in their 50s who are like peacocking and like, or maybe peacocking is the wrong word, but like definitely doing a lot of sort of like fashion things that I'm like, wow, okay, like this is so cool. And like try like me having conversations with them about these sort of things and feeling like there's sort of a connection there, which is fabulous. But I did
One
definitely
thing
think oh, go ahead.
No, the one thing that I wanted to say was that the part of the story that did really resonate with me was that the idea of wanting to buy things that had a particular story attached to them, right? And going like, okay, now this came from a particular place, or I did this because of a particular thing. Like, it's like I bought this sweatshirt because it was available at Sibone and for 2 weeks only during the Wakayama Knits pop-up or whatever. True story. So I'm leaning into my thing. But what it also made me wonder about was whether or not this kind of peacocking has become the province of the well-off, and whether it becomes exclusive to that. And one place that I think is interesting as an index, and Erin, I want to throw back to you here for a second, is in like what we think of as tunnel fits, right? Like the idea of this kind of peacocking that happens in pro sports arenas and that sort of stuff. Like, how have you seen the tunnel fit thing trickle out into the world?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like that has become so much more of a thing in the last like 5 years, even, or last 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to, like, you think of, I mean, the NBA is probably the biggest, like, most stylish, I think, of the pro, at least American sports leagues. Somewhere like the NHL, hockey, like that, they only recently allowed them to wear something other than a suit to come out of their like tunnel. There used to be a lot of rules in that. I think it's interesting because with a lot of these like tunnel fits, I think a lot of it is very like personal and big and loud, and I don't know. It's hard to see it trickling out. I don't know, kind of beyond the like ultra wealthy. Like I feel like NBA fits, or I know there's different like Instagram accounts that kind of document it, but it's hard for me, at least seeing it, to see like, oh, someone is riffing on what LeBron was wearing, or someone's doing an inspired by look. Like it almost feels like that's too exclusive, and that's too intense or too personalized or too specific, that I'm not sure if it's really making its way out.
Right.
Well, go ahead, Kyle.
Well, I was going to say, like, I think like that's like, I think there definitely is a conversation between those two groups, refer again to like the, Gen X, a lot of Gen X, especially urban, let's say urban, city, metropolitan, whatever, Gen X, they have the money, they can do it. So like they can dialogue with that. Few other generations, let's say, can. But I think the other kind of thing, to the point of can everybody actually do this, and like, is that actually happening, is like the thing that I sort of was struck by in the article was that how, and ironically looping back to the sort of like Gen Z Shein thing, is that like the article was so consumerist. Like it's so like, I need these brands. And like that was like, first, again, for Ben, you can maybe speak to this, for such a sort of like countercultural, not sell out generation, like going to the mainstream brand to get the like luxury thing. I was like, that's so fascinating, because like I would think if I had that, this is maybe millennial, you all tell me, is that like if I had that money and I had that sort of like resources, yeah, sure, I would be buying like whatever, like a Sunflower or a Lee, whatever. But like I would rather go to like a really nice vintage store and get like random ass shit that's no name brand that like truly is something only I can get. I'd rather go to the flea market, like the Rose Bowl flea market, or like whatever the fuck one in Paris, and get something that like nobody else can get. And like that is like truly one of a kind, and like those things can be expensive. I mean, not as expensive as a luxury thing, but like that's sort of where it's like,
yeah, for sure. You go to a Laura Kaleji or whatever, and you get the Tom Ford Araguchi, and you're spending a lot of money.
It probably boils down to convenience too, because at both ends, it's like I don't have time, so like of course Gen Z can afford Shein, they do that. Gen X, they can afford more, but maybe they don't have the time, and it's like, well, I'm going to go to YSL or Tom Brown or wherever and get these things.
Yeah, I think it's also you lean into, or it at a certain point you become overwhelmed with the paradox of choice, and you just start to go, you know what? It's true. When I was in my teens, I would have gone to the Salvation Army and found the Kurt Cobain grandma cardigan. But look, I don't need to. I can just go to Marnie and take care of it, like boom, kind of thing. And yeah, because I have the means and not the time, and to research or to shop, like let me just do it.
Well, and I think I think Gen Z also has an interesting relationship with celebrity and with
Right.
like the people that they are inspired by or aspire to, where like because they've kind of come up with influencer culture and being more influenced by TikTok stars or Instagram stars or YouTubers or things like that. I think that if they wanted to emulate an NBA player, that's almost like that's cringe. Like they're too big almost. You know, if that maybe it's like inauthentic to them, as opposed to somebody that they follow on TikTok or they have been following since they were 12. You know what I mean? Like I think millennials are still very tied to star athletes and celebrities, like actors and musicians and things like that. But I feel like Gen Z has like that's lost the allure a little bit because influencers can just be anybody. You could just be a random person and they can become famous, and they see that as something that they aspire to, as opposed to like, oh, I have to become a pro athlete, I have to train my whole life, I have to follow this career path.
Yeah, that's an intriguing byproduct of like our over reliance on the algo, and then depending on what the algo is doing, right? The TikTok algo in particular, it's like, so we're just going to throw a random person out here into everybody's feed, and then suddenly that random person is a celebrity, so to speak. One thing you said a second ago about, the heroes of a previous generation maybe potentially being cringe to younger ones reminded me, Kyle, of the story that you said about girl bossing. Just, like this insane Blue Origin, Katy Perry in space moment where on the one hand, like it's kind of an objectively cool thing that was made objectively radically uncool. I don't know. I'm still smiling about it because it's just so stupid.
A week later, I mean, it's like, like I think it's I think it's a sort of very good expression of a lot of the things that everybody's been really sort of annoyed or frustrated about, let's say, about class differences and sort of like the ruling class really expressing themselves. And that really was sort of a like, don't try to like STEM wash this or like girl boss wash this or whatever, cover it up and like try to make it anything more than it was. It was just like a fun little joyride. Like there was no actual like, because I was talking to a few friends about this like over the weekend, and it was like, okay, like was there actually, and I don't actually know this, was like, was anybody, yes, it was quote unquote all women crew, girl power, whatever, but like were any of those people in the crew, I know it wasn't Katy Perry, I know it wasn't Gail, I know it wasn't Lauren Sanchez, actually operating anything? Like no, like everything was happening from somebody on land in Cape Canaveral or wherever the fuck they do it. So it was like, so this is really just all show. And like, I think the reason why I think it's interesting is a sort of like, clearly it represents the end of a sort of girl boss expression and a specific sort of very 20s, very out of step with like reality and like what conversations, in larger culture are happening, which is why it sort of fell so flat. And, I really feel bad for, say, Katy Perry, because there was like a good 2-3 hours where like she was getting out of the woods. It was like, she is so funny, she is so off of it. And then once sort of Gail, really was like, you've not been to space, and it was like, well, they all are terrible. And then Katy Perry got crucified again. She was almost out of the woods, that poor girl.
I mean, last Friday night, right? Like,
God. But I'm sort of curious, like, I think it really captured how a lot of the, say, 2010 isms, not just around, say, feminism, but like, I think it was an easy expression of, say, sort of like girl boss, lean in, all that sort of stuff, really sort of being like, that doesn't work, it's over. But I think there's a lot of that to be said about like, different ways that sort of like sustainability and environmental movements are expressing themselves. A lot of like queer movements, like a lot of sort of like these organizations, again, Democrats are the perfect example. These groups that are trying to sort of like make change are really falling flat because like they are not in tune with the time. So like what could actually break through? I don't think there's any way that the Blue Origin could have been good, but like I think it's a larger sort of example for, say, organizations that are trying to connect.
Yeah, and Erin, it's interesting, right? Like there have been all of these stories recently about the ascendancy of, or the new primacy of women's sports, in particular, right? We see that with Caitlin Clark in the WNBA, and now Paige coming to the league is going to be another huge shot in the arm as well. Not to mention just like Is it Sabrina Ionescu who has the Nike shoe deal and has another shoe, has the Sabrina 3 coming out, which a lot of men, a lot of male NBA players play in. So we hear a lot about that. Is there anybody getting the, not to say girl bossing right, but like to striking the balance in the right way through this ascendant culture of women's sports?
That's a good question. It's interesting because I feel like, at least with Caitlin Clark and last year with kind of her rise, or even the last NCAA tournament where it was like the women's tournament was watched more than the men's, and it was the first time that had ever happened, and it was kind of like, wow, this is amazing, like we did it. I think people are kind of tired, kind of like with the Blue Origin moment of like having it be like, okay, we did it and that's it. It's like, no, that's actually the start. That's actually where we need to start. We need to keep like working from here. It's weird. The WNBA in particular is a little bit tricky because it still does not pay its players like men's leagues do, where like only until recently were players like kind of fair, not, I don't even know if fairly compensated is the right word, but like women in the WNBA would play during that season and they would have to go overseas to play somewhere else to supplement their income, or they would have to work second jobs, or they were being paid so low. Kind of
this is how we end up with Brittany Griner in Russia.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The women's stars are still kind of following like the male athlete blueprint of like, okay, I need to make money. I'm going to get my own shoe deal, or I'm going to do commercials, or I'm going to get sponsorships. So I don't know if there's anybody that I could think of that's really like breaking through or is trying to do things a little bit differently, but
it's going to be interesting to see how that works. One of the reasons, and I know this from talking to people at WNBA, is that one of the reasons the WNBA operates the way that it does is because it is a subsidiary of the NBA, whose budgets are controlled by the NBA, and where all of the air in the room gets sucked out of the room by the NBA. There's very little oxygen left for WNBA, in spite of the ascendancy of it.
Well, and I think what's interesting too is, at least with women's sports in general, the idea that a women's basketball game or a women's soccer game or whatever needs to have equal eyeballs to a men's game, or needs to have equal tickets sold to a men's game.
That's a false equivalency.
It's a false equivalency. The WNBA is, just celebrated its 25th anniversary. Like, it's still a very young league compared to the NBA, which started in, the 60s, 70s, and before that. There's so much infrastructure in men's sports, and they've been around for so long that someone saying like, okay, women, you have to do that in half the time with a quarter of the funds, makes it really hard for it to like us to actually get on kind of the equal level, I would say.
Yeah, I guess that part of my question, it has to do with the idea that because we now live in a universe where through digital discovery or platforms or whatever, there is actually an opportunity to do it. But the truth of the matter is that it's probably something similar to what you're saying, which is, yes, there might be edge cases, but in point of fact, building businesses, building equity, creating relationships with people it's not like just what pops up on your For You page.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, because like a lot of this is like, it really, I think, boils down to education in a way. It's more educating an audience, educating consumership. So like it still is a bit in the sort of being bundled up into the like, girls are playing basketball, they in the big leagues now, and it's like, okay, that conversation is sort of like ending, and like now it's sort of getting
Thank
into
you
the
for
phase
putting
of
on
like
your Carnival Parker voice.
That's my sports voice. That's my I don't know any sports announcer.
No wonder you're anti-sports.
Yeah, exactly. But like it's I think now getting to the point where it's like, okay, we have some breakouts, we have some people who like we can sort of put the saddle upon the horse that we call making this viable a thing. Like, we have the Caitlins, you have like the Angel Reeses, you have these people, and like it's now a matter of just like, yes, the shoe deals, yes, all that, but that is more, I think, yes, they're getting paid, but I think it's becoming more in the service of getting people to know them, know the cast of characters, even knowing the teams, because like people know the Liberty, yes, but like beyond that, that's the only one that I know. And like, granted, I'm not a sports person, so that's fine. I think it still is like getting people to understand it. I do think there's a better likelihood of the crossover with WNBA than say with like NHL. I think NHL is still very niche, But I think the WNBA has such an analogous something because like you don't have that with baseball, you don't have that with football. It's a very easy something that can just sort of like cross and like seems like the right time.
Yeah. I think something that's been interesting too is kind of the rise of like the celebrity fan at a WNBA game where
Yeah.
you see people like
shout out Anne Hathaway, right?
yeah, or like Jason Sudeikis or Aubrey Plaza, or you have these
Right.
celebrities who go viral for being shown on the Jumbotron or being at a WNBA game. Last summer, I went to a Liberty game with my dad, and Julia Fox was there. And my dad
That's
didn't
great.
know who she was, and I kind of didn't know how to explain.
You didn't
I was
say,
like,
Dad, from
have you
Uncut
seen Uncut
Gems?
Gems? And my dad had not seen Uncut Gems, so then there's kind of no way. There's kind of no way to describe Julia Fox, but it's like,
don't make your dad watch Uncut Gems either. Like that's like
Yeah,
Uncut Gems. Just
know.
as a quick editorial, Uncut Gems is the kind of thing that you have to want to watch. No one should ever make you watch Uncut Gems. It's too much. It's too anxiety inducing. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
But I just think that there is, I don't know, it's kind of it is all being crossed over. And I think kind of that is a symbiotic relationship of celebrities using sports to have more exposure, but then the league is also getting more exposure from the celebrity. So I don't know. That's just interesting too.
I was going to say maybe perhaps, and I don't know this for sure, but I think perhaps more than any of the leagues, like I think to the point of what you said earlier about like the need for and the import of influencers, like there clearly is like that play as well, where like these, and I see it also like with tennis too, where like these players like Coco Gauff and people like that who are like younger and like really using social media in a savvy way. And I do think, we all know this, is that, young women are really a big generator of culture online, especially in places like TikTok. And like it's a perfect sort of merger. And another good example is like I'm forgetting her name, but like even the sort of like the Liberty mascot having her own sort of Ellie having her own sort of online presence, I think really speaks to that. Like I think I'm probably wrong, but like I think she is really up there to rival something like Gritty and like things like that. Or like there's not as many mascot icons like that, and like especially online. So like that's a really strong brand messaging that can transcend, and like it is. It's great.
Sorry, I zoned out there for a second because I was thinking about Bellboy, the new Hotels.com mascot, but that's a different podcast.
Don't know that one.
No Bellboy.
They just introduced him this morning. Breaking news here on Hip Replacement. Bellboy is the new duo.
Bellboy.
He's the new Gritty. Anyway, sorry. So, Kyle, I wanted to just, as you were talking there, part of what I was thinking about was the notion of, or one of the underlying sort of tenets of your post over the weekend on the Trend Report, but then also the article about luxury sport entering, or luxury culture entering sport, luxury, so on and so forth. And the point you made in the newsletter that I thought was great was the idea that we are used to these brands, or economically speaking, brands have this interest in trying to create a total lifestyle relationship with the consumer, right? So that you are buying the pair of pants, and then you are buying the small leather goods, and then you are buying the pencil, and then you are buying the dishware, and then you are buying the travel, excursion, retreat experience, whatever it is. Which to me, like from a business perspective, tracks, right? It's of course this is what you want to do. Get to every consumer touch point. But what I wondered about was, do you see, is there a generational aspect in that you see as being notable or different?
That is a great question. I'd also be intrigued to get your take on this, Erin, because like I don't know like truly the generation of these sports teams, but I will say like I know F1 is like that crosses over with like a very young, very affluent European boy, let's say, and that is a really interesting play because like I think Louis Vuitton being there is a very good reminder of like get your Louis bag, like whatever the fuck that cute French guy who drives a car, I don't remember his name, but like he goes viral every so often on TikTok. Him and I'm forgetting the other guy's name, the British guy who did the thing with Burberry. Like it's a very like
Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, it's a very it was Ferrari, I think, not whatever. It doesn't matter. It was something with the fashion brand. It's that person, yes. But those I think are good examples of like, extrapolating from the sort of hallway walk into these other spaces to be like, yeah, American, your basketball. we got F1, we got rowing, we are actually rich. So come on down to Chanel and get your blah, blah, blah. So like, it's, to me, that's what it seems. And I think it's just sort of like, yeah, it's sort of a reminder of, I think, like cross-generationally, like, oh yeah, we're here for you at the F1, whatever. I wouldn't be surprised if they do a similar thing at the Kentucky Derby. But
well, like, I mean, the action. So, Erin, sorry, I want you to jump in a second. The action is, or the axiom, rather, excuse me, is grow the culture, grow the market, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and so it makes sense that these companies not being a part of sport go, there's a market that we're not part of. So if we can grow into sports culture, then we take part of it. I guess, Erin, the thing that I'm surprised about is the extent to which those brands are welcomed into the sports world in a way that has nothing to do with their utility in those worlds, or not for the most part anyway.
Right. Yeah, I guess I don't think I'm as surprised because there is so much money in sports and in the sports world, and there is so much wealth, and these are the highest paid players and highest paid athletes and the billionaire owners. Like, there has always been this kind of component of wealth.
Sure.
And I think as a fan, it's all still like aspirational of you know, to be watching the game, you could sit in a regular seat or sit in the luxury box and heated seats and whatever, and get to use a separate entrance and get to have fancy food or whatever. Not only is it aspirational in, yes, you want to be like these athletes or like these owners or whatever. It's like you want to be like these celebrities who are watching the game and who are, I think it's just still kind of tied to sports has kind of been an untapped market, but at the same time, it has always been a market of just wealth.
I mean, it definitely, to me, I think to that point is like, I think they sort of, I don't know why they didn't realize it first or sooner, or why they didn't also go for like the NBA, because it's like, again, in these times, and we can't remove any of this from the context, is that like, I think they sort of realized, okay, budgets are getting tighter in people's homes. We're not going to, and again, this is really simplifying things, but like, we're not going to go to like the gay son or like the wife who might get the credit card because they don't get the credit card no more. We're going to dad and being like, Dad, this is now a manly thing. You know, you need to be doing this because like this shows you have power, Dad, and you need to regain that power. And like,
right,
so like that to me is like,
it's almost like a counter to how a lot of these sports leagues are now trying to appeal more to women.
Yeah.
Again, they know how powerful women's dollars are. They also still have to be kind of catering to the ultra wealthy, to the hyper masculine.
Fucking sports.
Well, that is a fitting way to close this one out. Kyle, we're gonna have to start making sports a regular feature of the podcast, Erin, because we need to hear these kind of reactions from Kyle on a regular basis.
I can try and explain to you. I mean, I was gotten by an early age, and I could wax poetic about how it's all about my family and my cousins and my sister. And, you know, it's pure childhood love, but it's or we can just be cynical. That's fine.
I mean, little. I think the truth is, I think two things can be true, right? It's the ultimate. That's true. The superpositional nature of hip replacement is that two things can be true. All right. Well, everybody, this has been Hip Replacement episode 7. Erin Vail is here with us. Erin, where can the kids find you? Or in my case, the old people.
The kids can find me on Substack. It's called Fanbase. They can also find me on...
People can't find me at all.
Well, no. Very true.
You know, we don't want to be found. It's okay.
No, please go ahead.
I'm on Blue Sky. I'm at, I think, Erin Vail on Blue Sky, trying to not be on Twitter, but it's not really hitting the same. I don't know if this is going to date the episode, but with the Pope dying, there are a lot of memes going around. So Blue Sky is trying to be there with Twitter in terms of reacting to world events, but it's not quite there yet. So.
Just don't got that sauce. Don't got that sauce.
I think it can. I'm hoping it can.
All right, guys, bring the Rayos to Blue Sky. All right, Erin, great to talk to you. Kyle, as always, we'll be back next Monday for another episode of Hip Replacement. But in the meantime, thank you guys.